Okay, we are back live with another Between the Pages book chat. And today our guest is YA fantasy author Barakah Smith. I hope I got that right.
Of
And
course.
she's here to talk about her book, Stranger in a Familiar Place. And I'll let her introduce herself. So take it away.
Thanks, Stuart. It's actually Barakah. It's so close. Me people get it messed up all the time, so don't feel bad. Don't feel bad. But yeah, that's my first actually debut novel, which was Stranger in a Familiar Place. It's been out now for about a year, and it's been doing pretty well on it. I wanted to create an answer to the question as of why or what actually happens whenever we go into some sort of a limbo state. Most people talk about when they go into what is known as purgatory or limbo. Some people went to heaven, some people saw their best friend, some people saw their grandmother. It runs the gambit on what they actually saw. So I took a little bit more of a Christian background approach to it. So it's written more of the style of C.S. Lewis, but I kind of answered the question myself in a fantastical story.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about what the book's about, the plot, the characters, whatever.
So we meet up with a character named Elias, and honestly, Elias is probably the most nondescript character I will ever write. I probably will never make another character like him. When I designed Elias, he was designed to be anybody. Even his name was a play off of the word alias. So Elias is the main character. We follow him to the story where he wakes up and he's lost his memory. He does not know where he is. He has no emotions whatsoever. He's missing a lot of the key features that make us human or his humanity, so to speak. He is immediately paired up with Malak, a big old, massive, sassy talking polar bear who helps him basically navigate the world that he finds himself in order to get back home. Malak himself is actually dealing with his past that may actually inhibit his ability to bring Elias home and may actually get Elias killed. So it's a cool story about basically how they go through this journey of friendship and darkness and reconciliation and come back to the end of the story. So
Okay, so what were some of your inspirations for writing books? You mentioned C.S. Lewis. Are there what else were your reasons for writing it?
um, for for I guess the authors that kind of inspired me, Frank Peretti was definitely another Christian author that definitely inspired me. The way he wrote was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. Another author is Sarah Douglas. She wrote the Wayfarer Redemption series. It was like a string of 9 books, and technically they're all their own series, but it was just a fantastic, wonderful world building experience. Unfortunately, she has passed away and she's not writing any more books, but she could build worlds like no other. And so these 3 authors really were the foundation for who I drew inspiration from in creating the book.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about Elias. What are his weak points, his good traits?
So Elias has the problem of he doesn't actually live his own life. um, he's kind of in that place where he kind of lets everybody tell him what he should be doing. Like, hey, you need to be doing this, or hey, you need to be doing that, or hey, you should do this, or hey, you look like you could play football. Let's do this. And so you the book kind of opens up with him sort of monologuing about it a little bit of, you know, he was told to do this, he was told to do that, but he never actually wanted to do any of it. And at the very point that he's basically coming to the end of his life, he realizes he actually wants to live. Um, so through his journey, he starts to assert himself, not only just finding the things that are important to him and why they are important to him, but also coming into his own person at the same time.
Okay, that sounds interesting. So, it sounds like it's a little bit of a journey of discovery, the book, but what are the antagonists? Do you have any external antagonists in this book as well?
There are some antagonists. I don't want to go too much into it because then we get a little bit of plot spoily a little bit. But there are ones that float around Malak specifically. I do have this moniker where there's this beast that tries to kill Elias in the beginning of the book, and it kind of fades away, and there's this overhanging darkness that's following them, but there's not really a clear definition of what it is until the end. Um, so there are some antagonists that are approaching of it. That's actually part of the hidden of the plot. So I'm not going to try to get away. But they mostly have to do circling around Malak's past. There's two characters in particular that come into play that really do have that antagonistic role for the two characters.
Yeah, well, mystery antagonists can be fun. So, tell us a little bit about Malak. Why a polar bear?
Well, when I first was writing this book, I did think I wanted an animal guide. I really did sat down really long and hard about it, and I was like, I think I just want an animal guide, with the exception of yes, he can turn human, but I just want an animal guide. And the very first thing that popped in my head, really, maybe not so ironically, but ironically, was a lion. I'm like, that's been done. Like you can't do no lions, no minxes, no foxes, no wolves, like none of those. I was like, what's an animal that hasn't been used or is rarely given a good spotlight that you can really play off the character? And I just kind of thought about it. I was like, well, polar bears. Polar bears are really awesome creatures. I love polar bears too. So I was like, you know what? Why don't we use a polar bear? It's out there. It's awesome. And Malaka is just one of those chill, fun guys that you hang out with a Saturday night on the drink. But will, if you're not careful, will kind of be savage, and you didn't even realize he was trying to be savage. And he has a complex about keeping his fur white. So he's all good until his fur is not white anymore, and then he just throws tantrums.
So he's a little vanity streak, does he?
Just a little bit. He does have a vanity streak about him. I mean, you learn why he likes to keep his fur the way it does, but I did have fun having these little moments where he's like, "Don't touch my fur."
Okay, so what was the hardest scene or type of scene for you to write in the book?
I would say, I mean, overall, it was kind of hard, just because of the nature of what the book was trying to do and what I was trying to keep secret until the end, and still drop little hints. But I think probably the most difficult scene for me to write is when he meets up with a character called Yiddick. Um, Yiddick is a representation of basically suicidalness in the book. And Yiddick is pretty much a very, very madman type of person who delights in cutting himself. So having to write a scene where the main character is that crazed character that enjoys self mutilation and others mutilating themselves was really hard for me to try and be like, okay, would I be creeped out by this guy or not? And then when I did reach the point where I was creeped out, it was hard to keep writing it. So as far as writing the book, I think his scene was a little hard for me to write.
Okay, yeah, understandable. Those um, horror like scenes sometimes can be difficult. So what was your favorite scene or type of scene to write in the book?
Um, that's kind of hard. I think I liked my I liked the part in the book where Malak and Alliance have what I call like a shared moment. Something really you learn about a pivotal point in Malak's background, which comes to right. It's right before we get to the climax of the book, and it was a really touching moment where Malak has been this strong, helpful, supportive character throughout the whole entire thing, and you just realize like no, he's got this humanness to him that makes him vulnerable, and him and Elias were able to share that moment, and I think that was probably one of my favorite parts of the book to write.
Sounds like a lovely scene. So, do you have any themes running through the book?
There is basically I would say it's definitely a theme of life and death. um that would, if I had an overall theme, it would be life and death and the power of choice. A lot of times, people don't realize how powerful their choice is. You can choose to do this, you can choose to do that, you can choose to do this. No, for the most part, no one makes you do any of the choices that you make in life. And it's a very, very powerful thing.
Sounds good. So, are any of your secondary characters a little quirky, or do they steal scenes?
Mirren is, I guess, my quirky person, but she's quirky in a different reason. She's like the bad cat that knows he's bad and will like look at you at the table, with a piece of glass and would just knock the glass off the table while looking at you like, what are you gonna do about it? Um, I had really fun writing her because again she loves antagonizing Malak and just like poking fun at him and just dancing around the two and making Elias embarrassed whenever he does regain his emotions. She loves poking fun at it. She just likes poking things that typically speaking, there are natural social barriers around, or there's just that, oh, you wouldn't really go there with that kind of person if you did know there. And she's like, I don't care, it's fun, let's do it.
Okay, so what are your characters afraid of?
Mm, I would say for Malak, his would be mm, failure to be that good friend, to be that loyal person. It really is for him would be the split between loyalty and friendship. That I think he really is afraid of. Elias really is just afraid of losing himself, honestly, and not really knowing what's going on with him, or if he should be this or if he should be that. There really is this kind of like, well, I don't know where I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know where I'm supposed to go. And throughout the book you do have these small moments where he kind of looks at Malak and he's like, hey, eh, who am I? Like, Malak kind of looks at him, he's like, you're Elias, boy, what else you need to know? And he's like, I know there's supposed to be something else there, but I can't remember. And so, it's kind of one of those things where Malak gets to comfort him on that regard. So losing himself is one of Elias's fears. Mirren really doesn't have a fear. I didn't really give her one. She again is just kind of all over the place, and there's a reason for why she's all over the place. But yeah, she doesn't really have any fears.
Okay, so what are some of the good points and the bad points of your world?
Good points is that it's very, very digestible. Um, I kind of wrote it with this abstractness, with enough detail so that you can picture what's going on, what it looks like, who's doing what, but I leave enough room for you to fill in the blanks. So there is a lot there, unless there's like something specific that I need you to have down specifically, it was this color, or this was this size, or he was this way. I really do leave it up to your imagination to kind of fill in and flow with it. Because as someone very, very poignantly said, is that sometimes the human imagination can either do far better or far worse than what we can actually write down on paper. So I think I did a very good job building that world, not necessarily in solidarity, but in abstract. Worst part about my work is that I had to shorten it so much. Um, being as this was my first novel, and most people don't really take a chance too much on debut authors that they're not familiar with. I kind of had to play around with the fact of the book only had to be a certain length. I put that limitation on myself. So there were definitely backstories and characters and scenes that I so wanted to expound upon and put in the book. And several people have approached me and it was like, yes, I would have loved to know this about this character. But it just wasn't in the cards to do it that way. So unfortunately, I that would be what I would say the flaw is that I did have to condense a lot of it. So there is a lot of missing background, and there's enough there definitely to finish the story and go on. And people have asked for prequels and everything, but um, that's probably the shortcoming of this book. Unfortunately, is just because I had to do those constraints.
Yeah, well, that's what companion stories are for.
All right.
Yeah. Okay, so you obviously write fantasy, but have you ever thought about dabbling in any other genres?
When I was younger, I did. I dabbled in, actually, I was a very avid short story writer. Sometimes I did I won't say nonfiction. I did do a couple of nonfiction stories where it was just about people in their daily lives or different dramas or no, I didn't do any thrillers, but mostly just dramas and thrillers. Um, I did do one where I did a lot of science on it, where these people were trying to get to the center of the earth and they were using it through windows, which is basically the fault lines in the earth. And, particular ones will crack sometimes almost all the way down to the center of the earth, for brief windows of time, which took a lot of science and effort and wording. And I found out it was fun, to stretch the truth a little bit. But I really just landed on fantasy and I just haven't looked back from there.
Cool. Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up here, and I'll let you tell everyone where they can find you and your books.
All right. So I'm go ahead and pull this up here. So this is the book here. There we go. The Stranger in a Familiar Place. It can be found on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, in hard copy and an ebook on both versions, Kindle and Nook. You can also find it on the Apple iStore as well for those of you who use the Apple Store. And I can also be found on Twitter and on Instagram.
Okay, so thank you for being here. It was a pleasure chatting with you today. And we will be back next week with two more authors, so join us then. And that's everything. Bye